Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are the Breakfast Club. We have a special guest in the building.
Yes, indeed.
I'm not going to fuck up your last name. So, Elaine, can you say it, please?
Welteroth.
I would have
Just
got
how
that.
it looks.
I would have got that. Just wasn't make sure. Elaine Welteroth, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, you guys. I'm a fan.
Okay,
This is a big deal to be on the
Let me
Breakfast
just
Club.
say, Elaine, because I've met you on a few different occasions, this book is so good. And you know I read a lot. And I do have to say, I read this book. I couldn't put it down when I started reading it. Your story is very fascinating. And I just love the way it's written.
Well, who are you, Elaine?
Thank you.
Who are you?
Who am I?
Yes.
Well, I'm an author.
Okay.
As of tomorrow.
Okay.
And I am a journalist. I spent 10 years of my career working in magazine journalism. I was the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue.
Okay.
And I'm also a new judge on Project Runway,
Congratulations.
among other things.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's get into Elaine's story, because at one point you said that you didn't like to talk about your age when you were younger.
Yeah.
Not because of the reason that people might think, but you were extremely young when you started off in this industry, and that put you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think ageism strikes in both directions. I was, eventually it became a good thing. I think sometimes being the youngest person in the room can be advantageous because you typically, especially now, you have a digital perspective. You have a sense of pop culture that maybe other generations do not. But for me, eventually I became the youngest editor-in-chief in Condé Nast history in 2017. But prior to that, I was always the youngest person in the room, and I was not the boss. And, I remember being 23 and, I was leading the beauty and style department at Ebony back then because there was just no one else in the office to do anything. So that's basically how I got that job. And I was so excited to finally get my first, big business breakfast, like this business meeting with this high-ranking executive in beauty.
At Bergdorf Goodman.
At Bergdorf Goodman. It was fancy. And we sat down, and at some point she started asking me a series of questions that led to, how old are you? And once I told her how young I was, she basically wrapped the breakfast and left me dipped, left me with the check. And I, at the time, was making like maybe $10 or $20 an hour. And so I was like, you know what? Note to self. A woman in particular, we have to keep our age under wraps in the workplace because sometimes it can damage, the relationship. And I felt like I needed to disguise my age in order to have a sense of credibility and authority.
You'd be surprised how often that is still happening now. Like men and women, especially in the hip hop business, they don't want to tell people what their age is because they think people are going, oh, they're old, they're too old to be doing X, Y, and Z, which I think is whack.
Right. But it's interesting how it works both ways.
Yeah,
Usually you
she's too
hear
young,
women
they
trying to
felt like,
hide their age because they think they're too old. But I just think that it just goes to show, like, the world makes women and men, makes us all feel like there are these false binaries. And you're either too old, you're too young, you're not black enough, you're not white enough, you're not smart enough, you're not woke enough. Like, there's just so many messages that tell you you're not enough. And that is really why I decided to title my book More Than Enough, because my goal is just to remind people that you can experience that sense of being more than enough even when you are a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Even when you are still evolving.
I think it's hard for people to truly be themselves. Like, I think when you truly be yourself and embrace who you are, then the world has no choice but to embrace who you are either. But if you're so busy
100%.
fronting and pretending to be all of these different things, you're sending mixed signals to the universe. So the universe don't even know how to accept you.
100%. And that's why, the subtitle of my book is Claiming Space for Who You Are, No Matter What They Say. And that is actually a form of activism, especially if you find yourself in spaces that were not built for you, which so many of us do, especially being, one of few people of color in corporate America. And, my book comes out tomorrow, but last night I decided to do a book blessing.
What is that?
So instead of a book party, I did a book blessing, and I had all my people come together and for a prayer and a blessing around this whole mission. And we did an exercise, a group exercise, where we had these little cards that have the subtitle, but with fill in the blank. So it says it says More Than Enough at the top, and it says, I, Angela Yee, fill in the blank, am claiming space for, fill in the blank, no matter what fill in the blank might say. And I was nervous to do it because it could be corny, it could be like awkward, people might not want to get that vulnerable. But when I tell you that room over maybe 100 people or so moved to tears, moved to laughter, everyone was everyone took the invitation seriously to get real, and people shared all kinds of things. I had a white woman in the room said, I'm claiming space for my activism, no matter what my middle-aged white friends might say. You know, I had people saying, I'm claiming space for my artistry, no matter what my fear might say. And I feel like we need those kinds of reminders to just push back all the fears and the insecurities and the systemic oppression that keeps us small.
That's one way to defeat systemic oppression, though, is to make space. Like, men have to make space for women. Straight people got to make space for gays. White people got to make space for black people and everybody else. Like, we have to make space for people.
Absolutely. It's part of our job, and we have to also make space for ourselves.
Yes.
You know, and it's not always easy.
Now, you also focus a lot in this book on you even finding your own identity and being able to make space for yourself even.
Yeah.
And I want you to talk about just the opportunities that you had coming out of school and everything. Like, you went to go work at Ebony, but you had an opportunity to go work at Essence.
Yes.
And you chose Ebony over Essence. So now explain the thinking and what made you make that decision.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm from a very small town, predominantly white community. Interracial family. My mother is black, my father is white. So Essence magazine was my Bible. Right. I would wait at the mailbox for Essence magazine. So my dream of all dreams was to work at Essence. And I remember when I applied for my internship, I was like, if you give me the janitorial job, like, I promise you one day I'm gonna take, not only am I gonna take it, and one day I'm gonna be the editor-in-chief. Like, I was so hungry to work there. So when I got that internship, like, you couldn't stop me. You couldn't tell me nothing. I was like, I've made it. But then I ended up coming across a woman named Harriet Cole, who at the time was working at Ebony, running Ebony, first black woman to run Ebony magazine. And it really wasn't the magazine so much as it was her trajectory that inspired me so much, because this is pre-Instagram, pre-multi-hyphenate generation where everybody has, you know, everyone's a slashy. She'd figured out how to use her magazine career as a jumping off point for her to really carve out a space and an intersection for herself, her authentic self in media, to which she could be, so that she could be like multi-platform. She sat at the intersection of black culture, style, and spirituality. That's her. And she was able to do that across magazines, best-selling books, TV, audio. And I was just like, I had never seen anyone who I could identify with and be like, oh, that's what I want to do. It's so hard as a young person to figure out what you want to do with your life. So to find this woman and to see myself in her, I was like, oh, my God.
Diversity matters.
It's if you can't see it, you can't be it. So when I reached out to Harriet, and eventually she invited me to come work with her at Ebony, which, let's be honest, it was the less sexy option at the time for a young girl who like is interested in fashion and beauty. But that was the first point in my career where I had to make a hard decision. Am I going to chase the sexy and what sounds sexy to my friends and what might look sexy on my resume? Or am I going to follow my instincts, my gut and my heart, which was pulling me towards this woman? And I just knew that I knew. No matter what everyone was telling me, they're like, why would you go work at Ebony? I was like, because working with this woman is going to change my life. And working with her every single day is going to set me up, at this organization, is going to set me up for a much longer trajectory. And I'm so glad I did, because I had to call Essence back and be like, I'm not coming. I know I begged to be in the...
Duh.
They were like, really? But you know what? At the end of that summer, it was the first time ever. It was the beginning of the recession in 2008. At the end of that summer, not a single intern at Time Inc., which owned Essence, was hired. Wow. So I would have been sent back home to California. I would have been in the unemployment line. Whereas at Ebony, I was one of one. Right. It was a small team. And by 2 weeks in on my internship, I was on set with Michelle Obama. Wow. And I was like, see, God, I knew it. You were
Even
right.
Even before your internship, you were on set with Serena Williams.
Like, yes, that was my very first opportunity. That was my interview basically for the internship. Was basically Harriet calling me and being like, "Don't you live in California?" I had an informational interview with this woman after I stalked her hard.
And I like that, and I would like you to explain that, because I love how you did that. How you even got the opportunity at Essence and the opportunity with Harriet because of you reaching out to them, and just how you set it up to kind of stand out from everybody. Because a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do I get my foot in the door in these places that everyone's trying to be, but you managed to stand out.
Well, I was relentless. I was hungry. I was low-key desperate because I was at that pivotal point, which so many of us have been in this college crisis, where you're just like, at the end of college, this is the first time in your life where you're like, wait, what do I do with my life? There's no one to tell me the next prescribed path. So once I figured out what I wanted to do, I had blinders on, and I was like, nothing can stop me.
And what did you go to school for?
Communication studies, minored in journalism. But, you know, when you come from a small town, to dream of moving to New York and working in magazines is just like unrealistic.
Right.
I thought, who am I to? I thought I needed to go for something more stable, less competitive, but I just decided I'm going to go for it. So I basically stalked this woman named Harriet Cole. I begged her assistant to, you know, every day I would call and just beg her for time with Harriet.
You said you would bring her coffee from
California
to New York,
which was crazy. And the
coffee grains?
No, I called and I was like, is there an opportunity, just 15 minutes, where Harriet can just make time and I'll bring her some coffee? And her assistant was like, wait, but don't you live in California? And I was like, yeah, no problem. It's all good. I'm just going to fly to New York. And she was like, please don't. Please do not get on a plane and fly to New York City with coffee. And so anyway, long story short, and I even like made a magazine mock-up with my face on the cover with like, she's the one for the job and like all this. I was so corny and so extra. Yo, I'm lucky I didn't get arrested.
No, did a billboard. Don't do that to her, because y'all said it was cool for the girl with the billboard, and that's exactly what Tyler Perry said. Tyler Perry was like, that comes off kind of stalkerish.
It does, but I'm saying she's lucky she didn't.
I know.
Y'all flip-flop
I was this
so
close.
much. You just agreed with the Tyler Perry woman.
I didn't say she was wrong. I just said she's lucky she didn't seem.
But that's exactly what Tyler said.
Right.
But she was applying for an internship.
And it worked though. But it worked.
So in applying for the internship, so she could stand out, instead of doing a standard resume, she did it like this.
I thought it was brilliant.
I think that's great, especially if you're going to work in journalism. Extra. She did a mock-up of a magazine, which is exactly what I would think a company would like. If it's a magazine, brilliant. It kind of makes sense.
Well, thank God. It's actually funny. She told me the story yesterday. I never knew this. She was like, actually, Elaine, you know, I never got that. She goes, my assistant was blocking you.
Really?
She was like, I never saw that. I was like, you never. I spent so much time on this
crazy
thing.
Why was the assistant blocking?
Because she was trying to hold on to her job.
Oh,
she wasn't trying to have.
She called so much. She was like, "It's that crazy girl."
Yeah, probably that too. But
a combination.
But I got really lucky because, you know, eventually I did get the informational interview with her over the phone, and right before we got off the phone, I said, if there's ever an opportunity to work with you, please keep me in mind, and if I never talk to you again, just know you've already changed my life. We hung up. I was like, I'm never going to hear from her again.
You got some bars on you, boy.
I was like, I was like, who is that girl?
You got some bars on you.
So I'm like, I'm never going to hear from her again. It's fine, because I'm like, I'm off to the races. 5 months later, I have my internship with Essence. I'm 30 days away from moving to New York to go pursue this dream. And then Harriet calls me back. And I'm working as a receptionist during the day, a waitress at night, saving all my coins to move to New York. And I'm thinking it's a butt dial. I'm like, this has to be a butt dial. This can't be Harriet. And it was Harriet. And she said, I have a shoot in Malibu. I know you live in California. Would you like to be my production assistant for the day? I'll pay you $250 because I'm looking for a new assistant. It would be nice for us to see if this works. And if it does, there could be a job waiting for you in New York, working under me on all things fashion and beauty. And I was just like, God, wait, what? 6 months ago, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I had no idea how I was going to make this dream happen. And now I have two of the predominant black magazines, of the dominant black magazines, like offering me opportunities. I was like, I will pay you $350 to let me work with you. So I jump in my car. My mom comes with me. We go down. We take the 7-hour drive from the Bay to LA. I roll up on set. This woman did not tell me it was a cover shoot with Serena Williams. So I'm walking on set like, yo, I am the black Lauren Conrad right now. This is next level.
You didn't group you out or nothing, though,
I didn't group you out.
Okay.
I didn't group you out. But there was this one magical, spontaneous moment that actually just confirmed, like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I walk on set. I realize that it's a cover shoot with Serena Williams. And the first face I see is the hairstylist, who happens to be the hairstylist who was trained in my Aunt Janet's salon in San Jose, who did my hair for all my proms. And I was like, Marcia,
she was on set doing hair.
She was like, Elaine. I was like, this is another sign. I'm where I'm supposed to be. And so I was able to be introduced to Serena Williams, and there was a comfort on set, and just that whole day was breezy. And at the end of the day, they offered me the job.
And
to
they
come
told
to
you,
New York.
she told you, don't speak to the talent.
She said, don't speak to the talent. She wasn't there when I got there, so I was not supposed to speak to anybody. But Marcia introduced me.
Yeah, you had no
what was it?
choice.
And honestly, it was so good. And I remember there was this one moment on that day I will never forget. I was standing next to the monitor while Serena's like posing in the water in a swimsuit. And now I know, looking back, like interns on set, especially if it's your first day, you do not speak unless spoken to. You're in the corner. I was behind the monitor next to Harriet, looking at the monitor, and I had the audacity to chime in with my opinion. I whispered to her, and I was like, Harriet, I think, there's a blue swimsuit that would look amazing on her body. And I was like, I took a risk, and Harriet just stood there like this. And I was like, oh shit, I've just ruined it. I've ruined everything.
You just couldn't be quiet.
I couldn't be quiet. And then she waited and she goes, Serena, we'll try you in that blue suit. And I was like, she listened to me. And then that blue suit made it onto the cover.
Wow.
Which is just,
but I think it's also
these things don't happen, by the way.
And I think
like,
it's also
not
how
my
you
advice.
said it. Instead of saying, the blue suit would be better, or I don't like
or
that
what she's
suit.
wearing
It's
sucks.
the way you said it.
Yeah.
I was just offering an
just-
opinion, which could have gone either way. You know what I mean? You have to feel it out in those situations. But luckily, I feel like I found my perfect mentor match. A woman who gave me space to have my voice heard, who trained me, who groomed me. And I never would have been able to do the things I've done in my career had I not started at Ebony under this Black woman. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a Black woman in media who opened the door for me.
That's beautiful. I love the fact that you pay attention to signs too.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't pay attention to signs at all.
You got to pay attention to the signs.
So what do you think about fashion now? Everything that's going on in the fashion world. What do you think?
What do I think about fashion?
Men and women's side.
What do you mean in terms of?
Very broad question.
Men is getting a lot of tighter. The outfits are getting tighter.
Oh, okay.
More feminine.
Well, let's see what
do
you're
think?
wearing. You want to stand up?
I'm just wearing a t-shirt.
He's talking about himself, yeah.
I mean, listen, it's interesting now, like as a judge on Project Runway, I'm judging fashion a lot, but I think more than the aesthetic, more than the fabrication, the fit, more than any of that, I think of fashion as kind of a form of self-expression. And I also think it's a platform, especially if you have a public platform, which most of us do. Even just having an Instagram is a platform. And I think the way that you use it to communicate how you want the world to see you, and the way you decide what brands you're going to give voice to and which ones you're not, I think it's political in a way. And so I'm interested on the show in particular, I'm interested in kind of connecting fashion with what's happening in the rest of the world. Because in a lot of ways, fashion can be and is political.
You even said as a judge, you don't want to tear people down. And you're very aware of how you speak to people and critique them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a creative person, I put a book into the world. I know what it's like to create something that you are vulnerable about, and you put your heart out there for the world to judge you. So I do try to be, and I was an editor-in-chief with a very young staff, of creative people. So I feel like my role on Project Runway is sort of a natural extension of some of the work I was doing at Teen Vogue, but it's just now it's televised, and I just, it's important to not, it's important to use your power. I think a lot about how we use power and privilege, especially as Black people. As we start to gain it, we have to be conscious of not using it to crush people, and we have to be conscious of using it to create space for other people to be who they are. And but I still tell it like it is, though. I still tell it like it is.
But it's not to try to get a moment. Like, I'm not trying to get a soundbite moment.
But here's the thing. We live in this era of very fragile egos. So think about all the rejection we all experienced on the come up. Nowadays, if somebody does that to the same person, it's like, you're being so mean and so rude. It's like, you're being a bully. No, that person just told you what you need to do better, and they're not interested right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Culture has changed so much in the last couple of years. But I do think people are more sensitive to bullying
and rejection.
But then at the same time, we live in cancellation culture, and Black Twitter is canceling folks every single day. So it's it's like a duality. There's like both extremes happening at the same time, where we're oversensitive, we're being politically correct.
All the canceling thing is whack. All the bullying thing is whack.
I feel the same way.
It's like, as a kid, by saying you don't like something about somebody, it was just your opinion.
That's it.
Now it's you're bullying him.
Yeah.
You're bullying him. And even in schools, like they're so quick to say a kid is bullying is getting ridiculous. The world is too sensitive.
You think?
And I'm a sensitive person.
We know. Well, Elaine, you talk about this in your book too, as editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. You had an instance where, maybe you weren't editor then, but you had an incident where it was what you were trying to portray was not taken the way that you intended, and you even had to admit there were things that you could have done better.
Totally.
And that went on Twitter and turned into a big deal.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. So, I think it's interesting when you are the first or the only of your kind in the room. Often you are expected to represent for your entire community. And there's this false notion that you step into that role completely clear on exactly how to do that and how to advocate for your community in a perfect way.
Impossible.
It's impossible.
Right. Absolutely.
All of us have to learn how to find our voice and how to use it properly. And it's a process. Like, being woke doesn't happen overnight. You don't just wake up and you're woke.
I hate that term. By the way.
Hate that term. I'm so over that term. But the point is that it takes time to wake up to how to use your power in the world. So here I was, at the time I think I was the only Black editor on staff, and I was, a couple years in, I felt like I had built up some credibility in order to start using my platform to talk about Black beauty and to center Black excellence. And we did it through beauty. I was the beauty director at the time. So I tell this story about being a mixed race woman. I identify as Black, but I went to Rwanda to get my hair braided, and it was a part of me kind of connecting with my African heritage through Afrocentric hair, and what my experience was bringing that back to white corporate America, and the kind of comments that I got, and the hands that were reaching for it, and it was just. And it happened around the same time as Zendaya, experience at the Oscars when she wore patchouli and when she wore her locks, oils. And that comment, that stereotypical comment that she experienced, and her amazing response to that, which was just so articulate. And so I wanted to address all of that, and I wanted to address how, in some ways, Black beauty is actually a form of activism. Because for so long we've been told our natural hair is not professional. It's not acceptable. And so I was like making a statement that to push back against that. And so I put this story out, and I am very clear that I think I want a girl to model, the girl that we're shooting, the model, I want her to be a mixed race person because I'm mixed race and so is Zendaya, and these are the heroes of this story. So we do the shoot. I feel so good about it. I'm like, I'm finally doing something for the culture. It's authentic. I'm doing it for us. So then it hits, and someone on Twitter takes a picture of it with a flash, so it makes the girl's skin look brighter. And they put it up with they don't read the story, they just see the picture, and they put it up and say something like, Teen Vogue commits cultural appropriation at its finest. That person has like 100 followers. Somehow it catches on. Right. Then the UK Daily Mail picks it up. Then, it went spirals. And I'm reading and there was a headline that went up that said, Teen Vogue publishes anti-Black story. And I'm like, did anyone even read the story? You know? And it was so hard. It was so hard. People came for me in my Instagram comments.
And they didn't want you to comment on it either.
They didn't want me to comment on it. I was like, you don't understand. I can't go down as someone who does. This is a misunderstanding, and I need to make sure people understand where I'm coming from with this. And
impossible to try to explain yourself on social media.
I mean, but you know
it's
what I
did? It's like putting
did?
Toothpaste back in the tube. It's
true, but I did decide to kind of go against what I was being advised at work, and I put out an op-ed, an open essay to address it. And what was very interesting was that this opened up a deeper dialogue with our audience that I'm actually really grateful for. The mistake led to kind of an opening for conversation, and the model chimed in when all this stuff was going on. She chimed in and said, for anyone who cares to know, I'm Black and French. So then it kind of opened this other conversation like, well, is she not Black enough to wear braids? But am I Black enough to wear braids? I'm just as Black as she is, but it's okay for me. So it kind of turned into this conversation about colorism and Black people dividing ourselves the way we. But listen, in retrospect, could I have done things differently to make that story more clearly for us? Could I have made a conscious decision to represent a dark-skinned woman because this is an Afrocentric hairstyle that comes from the motherland? Yes. When we have so few opportunities to celebrate us, we have to be very cognizant of how we're doing that. And I learned a lot.
But you still got to sell magazines too, and that corporation probably was like, go with a fair-skinned person.
There's different approaches to progress. Yeah. You can take it baby steps, or you can go in guns blazing. And I was doing baby steps, and I actually learned a lot from that. I was like, you know what? Because if something goes down, it's on me.
Right.
And I'm the one Black representative here, so I learned. I had some blind spots, and I'm glad that I did not stop because of that moment. Because imagine all the things I never would have been able to do if I got shut down by some people who were calling me out on Instagram. I actually learned a lot. And 2 weeks later, we were celebrated as, the brand that was, celebrating diversity in fashion.
See what I'm saying?
So
it's ebbs and flows. It flips just that fast.
People forget, then they move on.
So fast.
In the moment, it sucks, though. You're like,
devastated.
If it makes you feel
devastated.
better, Teen Vogue got me in trouble before.
Oh, what happened?
Y'all had a headline that said, "Is drunk sex considered rape?" And I was talking about that headline, and I was talking about the first time me and my wife had sex and how we were both super drunk. And it turned into Charlamagne the God said the first time he had sex with his wife. It was rape.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thank you, Teen Vogue.
You can't blame Teen Vogue for that.
That's where I got the headline from. I was just having the conversation.
But you know what? You know what's interesting? Too often in the age of digital media, we have clickbait journalism. Where we see something on Twitter, we're reporting based on what we saw on Twitter.
Absolutely, based on somebody's perception instead of the actual story.
Exactly.
Correct. Yes.
And so I think the bigger message was like people need to read the story, form their own opinion before we just retweet.
It'll never happen.
And it won't happen, but I hope that we can be more conscious of how we take in information.
It'll never happen. I think we're so far past that. Like, we are a headline culture. This whole interview, people will rarely listen to the whole thing. They'll take a clip of it.
I listen to all of your long interviews. I'm still maybe
you're
I'm
an
old
editor
school like that.
Yeah, you're an
I
editor.
appreciate long form conversation,
absolutely.
and that's why I appreciate that you guys do this show, because in an age that is so clickbaity and headline journalism, it's important that you do have this longer dialogue where you can hear people in context. But it still gets taken. I saw the Kamala Harris interview got taken out of context as well.
That was crazy too.
But if you listen to the podcast, if you listen to the interview,
the full show,
which
I wasn't
did.
here when that happened, and I saw that, and I was like, "Wait, what happened?" And I had to go listen because I wasn't sure what happened.
It was totally two different times in the interview. It was
short attention span.
Yeah,
very.
It happens.
Well, I just want to say that I was so impressed by this book, and there's some amazing stories about relationships as well that you guys have to read this book.
It gets juicy.
When I tell you, I think I read about 250 pages, like sitting down all at one time, and it's a 300-page book. So I read it, and I was like, okay, this is great. I was visualizing everything in my head, like it's going to be a movie or something. And Ava DuVernay wrote the foreword. So how did that happen?
Well, wait till you get to the end of the book, because it will be a full circle moment.
Mm-hmm.
She makes a cameo. I'll just leave it at that. No spoilers. But she has been a mentor of mine and a friend. And for me, there was no forward if it wasn't an Ava forward. And I told her that. I was like, I texted her, I was like, I know you're the busiest person in the world. So like, no pressure, but know that it's either Ava or bust. Like and she wrote back and she was like, I was like, you're honored? She was like, I'm honored. You could have asked anybody. You could ask even more high-profile people, and you asked me. I appreciate that. And yes, sis, I will do that. And I was just like, who's more? Like, you are, to me, that it doesn't get better.
The
so
pinnacle.
This is a dream. That's a dream come true.
Now tell them about your book event. You got an event coming up tomorrow, right?
I do. I have my first book tour stop in Brooklyn,
Brooklyn,
which is where I live. It's my chosen hometown, even though I'm from the Bay Area originally. And I'll be in conversation with the brilliant, my friend, Lupita Nyong'o.
Hey.
And it's gonna be, people are gonna be in for a little treat. We have a little special treat happening right at 7:00.
You're so
no
great at
CP
all these
time.
little special touches that you do. She bought
I'm
us
so
presents
extra.
and everything that were amazing.
Aww.
You in the
Just to
basketball?
celebrate the book.
Your Warriors fan?
I'm not.
Doesn't matter to you then anyway. All
What?
right. Well, good luck to them
What were you
tonight.
gonna say? Oh.
That's what I was going to say. Good luck to them
She's
tonight.
like, I'm not. I don't.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. This was fun.
Is this gonna be a movie?
Inshallah. We're manifesting.
Inshallah.
I feel like everything you've manifested has happened. You just had to work on the relationships to get it right now, but
That's it. That's
That was
it.
the
I
only-
try not to talk about anything until it's real, but we're manifesting.
There you go.
there we go.
Well, it's Elaine Welteroth. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.